Hello, my name is Carl Surrey and this is a video tutorial for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. Now the title of this video would be the Beginner's Guide Part 20, looking at the depth of field filter. Now yesterday I did a video which looked at making tilt shift images, and I showed you two different ways of making a tilt shift image, and the second way was using the depth of field filter. So I thought while I was looking at that I must also look at all the options of the depth of field filter in this new video. I will have to recap the tilt shift bit a bit. So hopefully if you've seen that video you will bear with me as I go along. Right, you can access the depth of field filter via the effects menu. So if you just click on the effects menu, come down to blur, and one of the options in the blur menu is depth of field. You just click on that and this new box with all the adjustments are available here in the depth of field. Let me go to the tilt shift option. As you can see here, there's a drop down menu with different options, and then we have the aperture settings here, and then below that we have the boost settings. There's also a distance slider which has no effect within the tilt shift options, but we will come to that when we look at some of the other options. Now there is the radius is basically how much of the image, how blurry it will be. I think by default it's set on 10 and the blade count is 6 and blade curvature is 0, angle is 0. But if you've used it before, it will come back with whatever the previous settings were. But so if I increase this up quite high, it should, as you can see here, got quite blurry in the top and the bottom, and a little bit blurry in the middle here. Let me drop this back down to 10. There you go. Right, now the blade count. Now in this white box here you have the circle, and inside that circle you have this shape which should be a 6-sided shape because 6 is the setting here, and it is basically, as I understand it, is the shape of the blurring pixels. So I think the lowest you can get is 3, which is a triangle, so they would be blurred in the triangle shape, and then I think the highest is 10, which is almost a circle. So that's how the pixels are blurred, and I'm guessing this will have a major effect on how the blurring works. But to be perfectly honest, I can't really see that much difference between 3 or 10, so I leave it on 6 because that is a default setting. Then we have blade curvature, but at the moment, because it's set on 0, these lines are straight. If I increase this, you should see that they start to just bulge out slightly and become more rounded. If you go very high, these will almost be round. Again, I'm assuming if it's almost round, there's going to be sort of gaps within the blur, so it may become less blurry. And again, I don't really see that much difference of how that works, so I leave mine on 0. And the angle, it just rotates them really, as you can see by that going round. So I'm guessing if you know what you're doing and you can work out what's best for your image. You could alter all of these, but I personally never alter the bottom three. I just alter the radius, which is more blur or less blur, depending on what you want. Now in the boost section, now obviously if you push up the brightness it would get brighter, although it hasn't had a major effect on my particular image here. Now the threshold, I'm not always fully understand how threshold works, but as I read in the help files, as I understand it, it works in conjunction with the brightness, and at a low setting the brightness will affect the dark areas as well as the light areas, but the higher you put push the threshold, the brightness will only affect the lighter areas. Again, I very rarely touch these because I pretty much have the image as bright as I want it before I use this filter, so I don't alter that much. I do alter saturation and clarity quite often because this sort of tilt shift image works quite well when the saturated colours are quite saturated. So the last time I used it was on 41, so I will leave it there for now. But the clarity, it just sort of helps sharpen the center area mainly, and if you push that up, hopefully you can see that that center area is becoming much more sharper, and it also does slightly affect the outside area, but it's mainly the center area that is being affected. So let me push this back down to 0. So now we've looked at some of those options, I will just move this out the way slightly. So in fact I better move it over here, I think, so we can see the image. Now this is part of what we looked at in the previous video where I just did the tilt shift, but you have these 4 lines. These can be altered by clicking on a line. As you can see, when you hover the mouse over the line, you get this double-ended arrow. If you click and hold, you can move them up and down. You can either hold the top and bottom ones to affect either one of those, or you can click on the middle ones to affect either one of those. What you have to remember is that the middle section will be where it is no blur, and the section above that middle and below the middle is slightly blurred, and the section at the very top and the very bottom has the most blurring. Now the difference is that it is a sort of graduated blur. I mean, the clearness of the middle just slightly blends into this section, then it becomes more and more blurry, then it starts to blend into the next section. So it is sort of pre-graduated for you to make it easier, because I can probably see it best on this these chairs down here, because just below the line it is still a bit clear and probably fully clear, and then it just slowly gets more and more blurred as it goes down until you get below this section here, and then it's quite blurred altogether. So what I will just raise this up again to about 25. Let's try 25, yes. So the higher you push this, obviously the more it affects the gradient, and now this area just under the line is starting to creep into nearer to the line itself. I hope that makes sense. Right, the other thing you can do is move the whole section by, there's 3 dots, one there, and one there at the bottom. If you put the mouse over the middle one, click and hold, you can move it up and down as you like. And if you put it over the top or the bottom one, click and hold and move it left and right, you can tilt the angles, which is what I'm going to do with my one, because these seating is at an angle. That is what I want to do, so I'm just going to bring that down, move that to there. So basically all that area in the middle there is clear, and then it graduates up and down. You can also move the center one left and right, and this will be the main area of clarity where this is. So I want it over this gentleman sitting here, just to make sure that he is the person fully in focus. And then that is the tilt shift one looked at. I'll click OK, and it'll set those settings down, and then that is the final image with the tilt shift effect added to it. And if I just zoom in here, probably to there, it has a sort of toy village type look to it, which is what the tilt shift effect sort of really is what you're after. Right, so moving on to one of the other options, I will use this image here, and so again we will go to Effects, Blur, Depth of Field. Now the last one I used was tilt shift, so that settings are already in place, but this time I'm going to go for linear gradient. Now the linear gradient, it works in a similar way to the tilt shift, but you only have these two lines. Let me just straighten this up. And bizarrely, I don't know quite why that it's done it. They do it this way, but it is most clearest at the top, and then it gradually gets blurred in the middle section, and then the bottom section is the most blurred. Now, I think this is probably best used on landscapes, and for me, and with this particular picture anyway, I would want the sky blurred, because I mean you obviously don't, that house and building there is not too pretty, so we can sort of hide that a bit. So I will put the cursor over one of these white dots, click, and then I will just rotate the whole lot around, and then I will move both these white lines up there, bring it down a little bit, and then I'll just rotate this, try and straighten it up a bit better. So then I've got like a clear, the near part, the front edge of the picture will be the clearest, and then as it goes back to the distance, it gets more and more blurred. Now the distance slider is available in this option. So if I bring this down to 0, I see what it has done is reversed that round to where it was. So if it on 0, the top would have been blurred and the bottom would have been clear, but that way it's reversed. Oh, I see. See, even I'm learning things as I'm going along. So if you had it in the middle, I'm guessing the top and the bottom would be blurred and the middle section would be clear. Yes, it pretty much is. So basically, whether you have that to the left or to the right is whether the top is blurred or the bottom is blurred. So as I've now set this up like this, I will click OK, wait for it to settle down, and then that is that image given a bit of depth of view that I never had in the original image, and it draws your eye to the foreground and blurs the background, which is the effect I was after. Right, moving on to the next options. Unfortunately, you have to look at this picture of me here. And I'm going to look at, so go to blur, depth of field, and we'll be looking at, these two are pretty similar. We've got elliptical and radial gradient. I'll look at the radial gradient first. So this is just a basic circle. So I've with a dot in the middle. So if I put the cursor over that dot, click and hold, I can move it to the center of my face, and then I can increase the size of the circle like so. Now again, the distance slider is available. If I bring this down to 0, the center of that will now be the clearest and the outside will be blurred. So you can, and so if I raise this up to the other distance, the inside will now become a bit blurred as well. But the outside of this image was already blurred. I mean, apart from my shirt sort of down here, because if I bring this out as far as it will go, this becomes even more in focus. So if you have something, obviously not just a face, but I mean, I don't know, a deer in a field or something, you could just highlight the deer and blur the field and the background to suit. So I will cancel, no I won't cancel, what I'll do is I'll just change to the elliptical, which is basically similar, but you have more circles, and this center area is the clearest, and then a bit like the tilt shift, you get the various degrees of blurring as you go out. So if I, and you can change the shape of the inner circle or the outer circles or both the circles by how you grab hold of the white dots. So you can tinker with the settings. It's pretty similar to the radial gradient, and again you have the distance. Oh no, the distance one is not available in this option, so whatever settings you have for blurring is really done by these options, but that is okay for what this demonstration, so I'll just click OK, wait for it to do its thing. Sometimes it will take quite a while to do, but there we go, it's finished. And so the center of this image with my handsome face is in the most focus, and then it gets more and more unfocused as it goes out. So let me just undo that and go back to where it was. So as you can see there, my shirt and what have you was in focus in the original picture, although the background was out of focus. Right, this next one is a little bit bizarre, but I will just quickly right click here and duplicate the layer. So I have two layers now in the layers display area, because I need to add a layer mask, and I can't do that to the bottom layer because it is sort of locked. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly select, and it's not going to be very finessed here, I'm afraid, it's just for demonstration purposes, but I'm going to select all of myself here. You just bear with me a second. Yes, almost there. Sorry for the delay. Right, oh, that's good enough. I'll just take away that little bit up there, and what I'm just going to quickly do is I'm going to invert that so it is the outside area that is selected and not me, and then I'm going to add a layer mask, and that layer mask will be added here, and this is what I need to be working on. So I can now press Ctrl and D to get rid of the selection area. Now if I remember rightly, I need to click on the layer icon to make that the area that we are working with, and again come to effects, blur, depth of field, and this time go to layer mask. Now this will make the background even more blurred than it already was. It's probably best shown if I increase the saturation, because it, as you can see, the background is getting saturated and it's not affecting myself because that is being protected by the layer mask that we just made. So that is the layer mask option, which personally I think is pretty much a waste of time, because you could do the same thing by highlighting the bottom layer and then just blurring that normally, like with Gaussian blur for example. In this case you would have to have kept this area selected, and then it would have blurred the background and not the image I'm blurring at the moment. But that, to my mind, that would have been a quicker way of doing that. I would have just selected the image I wanted, made a layer mask of it, and then blurred the background. So let me just delete this, go back to the single image, and then I think it's the last time we go back to blur, depth of field, and the last one is uniform, which, perfectly honest, I'm not 100% certain why this would be needed, because this gives you a uniform blur across the whole image. You could just as easily just use blur, Gaussian blur, or any other the blur options to give you a uniformed blur effect. The only difference, I suppose, is that you can alter the radius and the blade count and all that to affect how the blur looks, but as I've said earlier, I'm not 100% certain that they make a great deal of difference, to my view anyway. So if I wanted a uniform blur, I personally would just use a normal blur option. So we'll just cancel that. Let's go back to that image there, and that is basically it, really. A very quick look at the depth of field filter, which is available via the effects and blur menu. Some of them I think are more useful than others, but have a tinker with all the different settings on different pictures and see what works for you. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.